Hello everyone. So in today's top video, we are going to see the new topic that is JPQL. Now, what is this JPQL? So as we have SQL query, right? In order to manipulate the records that are present in the databases, like we have different query to insert the data, update the data, right? So here also we have JPQL query, which is nothing but a Java persistent query language, which basically manipulates the Java objects. Okay. So particularly what is happening here is like in SQL, we are writing queries to manipulate the record that are present in the databases. But here what we are actually are doing is we are performing different operations on the Java objects. Okay, so that is why it is object oriented query language, which is used to perform database operation on whom, on Java objects, right? Then so what is the role of JPA here? So JPA is basically responsible for converting or for transforming this JPQL into SQL language, into SQL queries, right? So in order to construct the JPQL queries, there are two methods. The first method is a create query method and second is a name query method. So what is this create query method? So when we use create query, so here we have to pass a parameter that is a string name. So let's understand this. So this create query method is this two, like not only create query but create query as well as named query. These two methods are provided us to by entity manager. Okay, so why they are useful is like when we give the object name as create query. Okay, so it basically tells us that in anywhere, like in the code, if I want to write any JPQL query, right? So using create query, we can directly mention and access whatever objects we want. Okay, so that is why they are particularly the dynamic queries. But when we talk about the named queries, they are static queries because at first we need to define them. And then only the like whenever in the code, then whenever I want those queries, I can access them. But if I have not defined them, then we can't access them further anywhere in the code, like in the entity manager or in the which we are particularly talking about the persist classes, right? So that is the basic like main difference between create and named query. Like if you are using named query, so it means that they are static and they have to be defined in advance. But create query are dynamic, they can be defined anytime, anywhere, and whenever we want it, we can easily access it. Okay, now next is about, now let's understand like basic syntax about how you create these queries. Now let's come to this example. Now suppose we have been asked like in the database, like which we were using about the employee and department. So in department, as we have the department ID and department name, right? And in employee ID we have this different entries. Okay, now what we are particularly asked is to write a query in order to get the employees who belong to HR department, right? Now, how we are going to write it in JPQL? So the JPQL syntax is same as that of SQL. That in SQL, if we want to retrieve all the employees from the table, so what we give is select star from employees, right? So similarly, here also we have the same syntax as select E from employee E. Okay, it's like that. Now, when we talk about named query, so its annotation is at first is like we have to annotate it with @named query, and where we have, like as we know that for named query we have to define them in advance. So where do we define it is in the entity classes, right? So below the entity notation, we have to first define the name queries where the name, like here for example, as we are finding the employee that belong to the particular department, so this name can be anything. Just I have given a random, that is this is nothing but the employee entity class name dot, from that I have to find what, find by department. Okay, and then here we are going to the give the query. Okay, so that we will see in the coding part what is the query and all. So first what we have to pass, first parameter is the name that we are going to give to this query, and actually the query, the JPQL query. Okay, then next comes is like in the persist class that we have created, right? So there what we will do is first we will write the, then first we will declare there a typed query. Okay, now why we are using this type query? So let's think of an example, or in a very simple way, it is that we are making sure that we get the queries or the records from the database that we are asking from the database for, or we can say that we are getting the right kind of stuff when we ask from the database for the particular information. It's like I am expecting from database that you return me this type of results. Okay, so like it's basically like a telling to the database that what I want, or which tells database to give back the results that I want in a very simple way, I say. So that is just a make a like we can say a clear way for database to understand that we are expecting this to be returned, right? So what we are doing is inside the type query we are giving the name of the entity class, that is the employee entity. Then this is the reference variable for this type query. Then as we have said that this create query method or name query method, they belong to whom? To entity manager. That is why we are going to use the reference variable of entity manager. Then in that this method is present, that is create name query. So we are going to import it, and then we are going to pass the two fields. So first parameter is nothing but the name. So here name means what? The name of our name query which we have given here. Okay, that is employee dot find. So this whole name we have to pass here. Okay, and then next is the class on which that particular query will be performed. So like we are working on the employee entity class, right? So that class name we have to pass here. Okay, then what we are going to do is, for this query we are going to set the parameter. Now what happens is, like, we'll come to know further. Like for example, suppose I have to find a employee with name as suppose John. Okay, so for example what we will give is select E from employee. Okay, where employee E, where we can say E dot name equals to, that is nothing but E, that is name. Okay, so this thing, okay, what does it tell? That this is a simple JPL query that we are giving, and here we are not explicitly mentioning the name that we are going to find. Okay, it is denoted with this parameter like semicolon. Then we are going to give this as the name, and then value for this parameter we are going to set here. So this will change is like this. So it will change is like, suppose name, and what name we are searching for is John, right? So this is how this we are going to set the parameter that we are going to particularly find in the query. Okay, then what we are doing is we are creating a list. Okay, so that whatever the values or whatever the value this query is returning, we can store it that list, and then we can print it in the console. Okay, so this is how the named query is. And in create query, there is no need to define them in advance. Like we can directly define them while we are anywhere in the part of the code. So this query is just very simple. Start from type query, and here what we have is, as here we are passing in the name query, we are passing the name of the name query, but here we have to explicitly pass this whole query as it is. Okay, and then the remaining syntax is same. Okay, so now let's see the coding part about like, as our question is what, that we have to like find employees who belong to HR department. Now, if you look at our table which we have created in the mapping videos, so if you'll see there, so here basically we have employee entity table which has reference to department ID, that is a foreign key, and a department entity. So at first of all, if I have to find this HR table, sorry, HR, we have to particularly first join these two tables, right? So that is nothing but we are going to use what? Joins. Now let's see how we are going to perform it. Okay, so this is our employee entity. So let's start with the named query first. So give the annotation as named query, right? Then we are going to pass the name as, suppose, employee entity dot uh, find by find by department name, right? Then next parameter that we have to pass is the query, right? Now see how we are going to construct the query. Okay, now as we are performing join, so first we have to select the employee table, select from employee entity, right? Because our first is the employee entity, right? Then we are going to perform join. Now, as we know that here we pass the common fields that are common to both the tables. Okay, but now here, like, we don't have any direct reference to the department ID. The reference here is just the department, right? So we are going to pass this, that is department. Okay, because this is getting created in the database, but if we want to explicitly mention it in a code here, so we are going to use this reference, that is e.department. Okay, then how we are going to join it with D, that is a which is particularly present for the department entity. Okay, so from employee entity E, we are going to join e.department, that is department entity which is named as D, where D dot, now D name, that is the department name, is of type D name. Okay, so I hope you have got this query. So why we have not mentioned here is department ID, because we are entity, because here we are giving reference to the department entity directly as department, as you can see here. We have given this reference, so there is no need to write like join on, then department entity, etc., because this reference is directly pointing to that. Okay, so this is the basic named query that we have written. Now what we have to do is we have to access it or in the process.employee, right? So first let's save this. Now in the process.employee, so now let's create the typed query. So type query, right? Typed query is of employee entity type because it belongs, because the named, yeah, belongs to my type query. We have to also import the particular classes. Okay, then query, then which is equal to entity manager reference variable. As you can see, there is a method that is create named query. So here we are passing the name of our query, which is nothing but employee entity dot find by department. Oh, sorry, Control C. Yeah, Control V. And here what we are doing is we are going to pass the class name where the name query is present. It is employee entity dot class. Okay. Now what is the next step is to set the query parameter. So that is query dot, you can see set param parameter method. Okay, so here what we are going to set is the department name, right? As we can see, we are setting this parameter, that is department name. So we are going to pass it here, and the value is for this is nothing but HR, right? HR. Now what is the next step is creating a list to save these values, right? So employee entity of type employee entity. Suppose we are naming it as EMP list, which is equal to nothing but query dot. There is a method which is get list in order to retrieve all the value that will be passed to this queries. Okay. Now let's print it in the console. So for that we will use a for each loop for employee entity. Suppose, okay, uh, of type E. Okay, we are iterating over this employee list. Then system dot out dot println, and we are going to print the employee who, who belongs to HR department. Okay, now let's save this and run it. Let's see what happens. Okay, so particular in the console you can see that let's first see the database. Okay, so as we know that department with HR is given the ID as 1. So in employee entity field C, so to department entity, sorry, department 1, that is HR, 2 employees are present, that is Sam and Alice. So our in our console, or the value that it should be printed is Sam and Alice. So let's check it. So as we can see, our join is successful. So this is how particularly we perform JPQL queries, different types. So now this was about the named query. Now what about if I want to perform simple create query? Okay, suppose we have to create a query in order to update the employee ID one name as suppose John. Okay, so what we will do here is we'll just change the syntax as the named query, we are not generating it, right? So we have to first input the create query, right? So then in this create query, we have, as we know, we have to pass the query, that is your query is what, select E from employee entity, right? E, where E dot ID is nothing but ID, okay, which we are going to pass in short. And then here we have to pass the particular entity name, that is nothing but employee entity dot class. Okay, let's close this. Now we are going to change the value of the set parameter. So ID we are looking is for is 1, right? So ID we will set it to 1. Okay, then as we are updating it, so for now we don't need this list or not this method, let's just delete it. Now next what we are going to do is, as we are updating the value, right, so we have to save that value in the database also. So how we are going to do is, like, first suppose we do is let's first get the value, that is employee entity emp is nothing but we are going to get this query dot set, sorry, get single result, like just we are printing this in console that whatever named has been changed with ID 1. Okay, then what we are going to set is, now we are going to change the value of ID 1 to John, right? So what we will do is emp dot set name, and in name we are going to pass John, John, right? And we are going to save the changes to database also. So em dot persist is what emp. We are going to save it, right? And then commit the transaction, all the methods. Now, if we want to print the updated one, so let's also print it first. That is system dot out dot println. Okay, and suppose we have to print emp dot get name plus emp dot get id associated with that. Okay, so now let's run this and see what is happening actually. So when we are running it, we can see the value, the name has for id1 has been changed to John, and let's see in the database now. So in the database, let's refresh it, and yes, the values has been updated, right? So this is how using simple create query or name query we can particularly perform different JPQL operations. Suppose I want to create a query in JPQL in order to perform aggregate functions. Like we have to suppose count like how many employees are present in our employee entity. So for that, we are not going to use typed query, because typed query, they don't like automatically work with that of entities. For that, we have to create a DTO classes and all. They so for aggregate functions, we basically use the simple query. Okay, so the syntax is query, we are going to name it at em dot, suppose, let's change, first import this query. So import query, okay, then em dot create query as, now what is the query, like to select total employees, so that is aggregate function. So we are going to use a count function, right? Count from from whom? From employee entity, from employee entity. Okay, so as there is no need for setting the parameter here, right? So we will just skip this part, right? Then what, now we are going to particularly, and then here let's print the value. Okay, so how we are going to do is, let's first a console like the number of employees, then plus, then q1 dot get, as we are just fetching a single result, right? So that is why we have to get single result, and when there are multiple values, then we have to use result list. Okay, so this is a simple query. Let's save it and now run it. Let's see what the console gives us. So number of employees is nothing but 3 in our database, right? So this was about aggregate functions. We can also, like if we have more records like age and all, so we can also use for finding it for minimum, what we can say, minimum age or maximum age, etc. Now let's just see one more create query. Suppose if we want to return the employees between ID 1 and 3, like we are not having any age and everything here. So just try this filter operations and see whether they are working or not. So like for our case, so like select E from employee entity. Okay, that is E, where we can say E dot ID between 1 and 3, means all the records it will done, right? So for this, we need to create what? We need to create a get list or a list, because there will be multiple values that will be written, right? So just copy here, control V, okay, and of Q1, right? Q1, and then we'll just print this with the help of for loop. So for each loop. So for employee entity, that is of ID, is emp list, right? What we are printing is, it is e dot get id plus e dot get name. Okay, let's see what all values this returns. Just run it. Let's just check it. So as you can see, as it is between. So all the three values are returned. Okay. So these are the different simple JPQL operations. Like as we perform aggregate or anything in simple SQL, same things can also be performed in Java by using this type of JPL queries. It's nothing but create query or name query. Particularly, create queries are mostly used because they are dynamic. We have to directly define them. But if I have to perform same for the named query, like here as we are performing between operation, so for that, I need to first define here the named query and then I have to work with it. Okay. So this was all about simple what is JPQL and how we have to work with it. So I hope you got it, all what it is and how to work with it. Thank you.